Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the Yin Earth Pig Talk. We welcome Seanan Zook of Astrology. Seanan has been a student of Liu Ming since 2012, focusing primarily on personal fate calculation known as Zi Wei Dou Shu,
Zi Wei Dou Shu, yeah, Polestar.
or Polestar Astrology, as well as the daily reflection practice of the Tongshu, or Chinese Almanac. The underlying cosmology at the heart of these systems of mantic chronology can be very useful in providing a context for understanding our experiences of human life and the dynamics that surround us. Please welcome Seanan.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your, I'm sure, really busy schedules to drop in with this talk. Yes, my name is Seanan, and I've been studying with Liu Ming since 2012. Maybe many of you are familiar who spoke here on occasion. So definitely some context there by which we can reference the material. And so essentially we're talking about something related to the Tongshu. The Tongshu itself is the oldest continuously published book in human history. In medieval China, Song Dynasty, in 1 year there were more Tongshus published than Bibles have ever been printed. So it's an enormously influential book, and it's not very long, but it's a sort of a guideline or a marker to help trace our experience. It's very embedded in Chinese culture, what we call Chinese culture. So that thread comes from the Liu family, and all an amazing sort of happenstance to Liu Ming, who spent some time with us. So I'm tremendously grateful for this opportunity to speak to you guys and come forward on the year of the 2019 year of the Yin Earth Pig. So transitioning from the 2018 Yang Earth dog to a Yin Earth Pig, we can talk a little bit about the first transition being one from Yang to Yin. Right, so Yang being much more forward-going and active, engaging, now sort of recedes. And so we have this much more kind of nourishing, and from time to time I'll be referencing some notes. They have this much more nourishing, but also kind of responsive, consequential sorts of conditions to the year. So, these things don't occur in a vacuum. One feeds into the next. So in a lot of ways, 2019 very much depends on how we spend our 2018, right? And the things that we set in motion in the Yang Earth Dog start to find sort of a consequential fulfillment with Yin. So if you may have noticed, like Earth is pretty heavy. Like there was a lot of pressure last year, and it had a lot to do with like sort of ancestral senses of continuity, and more tribal sort of relationships that opened up a series, if you may have noticed in society, a series of sort of division, historical divisions, either interpersonally or society as a whole. So we had these kind of like deepening and like bringing into awareness a lot of conditions that have kind of always been there with us, but it's much more prevalent, much more noticeable, much more like in your face. Earth is still heavy. So with the Yin Earth, you're looking at kind of like a pushing mom. Something that knows better, but actually really continues to apply the pressure of the lesson. So we are talking about a transition, though, to a pig. So pigs are often understood as like lucky, or enjoying, or very engaged sociologically, humanitarian, easygoing. This is great, but it's also the chi of a kind of sensory experience. We can look to our daily experience of pig chi to kind of get to grok what it means to be in a year of pig. Because every day, pig doesn't occur just once every 60 years or once every 12 years. It occurs every day. Every earthly branch in the Tongshu occurs every day. So right now, I think we're still in snake hour. The pig hour would be typically from 9 to 11. So it's a time of dissolution. It's a time of sensuousness, in particular. And if you think about the ways in which you spend your hours from 9 to 11, it's preparing for sleep. It's releasing, equivocating, not equivocating, but more like moving toward a calamity, rest. And it's tied to our senses. It's tied to our body. We're releasing the day and settling in, and through sort of an awareness of our incarnation, and we go into this place of like losing ourselves in sleep and dissolving. Well, I'm sure you've all had this experience of losing yourself in something. Music, a lover's eyes, friendship, some hobby, something that really activates you. And when you lose yourself in these places, you are dissolved. This is the kind of enjoyment that Pig is talking about. This kind of like really sensual quality, but also kind of a complete releasing of like narrative, of personhood. Yeah, it's I like to say that Pig is a remembrance of our fundamental interconnection through the act of forgetting. So, what happens when we lose ourselves in something, right? Can we be mean to somebody? Not so much. Yeah, we're like, kind of like, once you come out of this awareness of being lost in something, like the person next to you is like your best friend. And so there's a kind of like, this is the root of the Pig's humanitarian nature. And an awareness of this like almost intuitive quality of interconnection. That we're all here in this place, and isn't it marvelous? It's like, this is this place where enjoyment can transition to joy. Transitory, not hold on to, like move through. But it's so the invitation in a whole year of Pig is to find this enjoyment, not aggressively, but like it's just an invitation to come into awareness of the things that we're already drawn to, those things that remove us from our own narrative, in which we can find this kind of holistic, naturally deriving holistic way of simply being. Okay, that sounds pretty mystical, but it's very immediate and available to our senses, and this is the teaching behind the earthly branches. The medicine, if you will, of like Pig Chi is this kind of sense of immediacy of our experience, and how our enjoyment of that immediacy then tends toward this kind of unknown quality. Naturally, Pig is a yin water, so it's dispersion, it's release. The physicists had this idea of the heat death of the universe, where everything just goes out to like equal relationship from one another, and there's no movement. Right. Well, in cyclical time, it doesn't stop there, but that's a nice metaphor for sort of understanding yin water. There's this sort of, we're all sort of in this equal, naturally occurring equal place to one another. So in the context of our social groups, this should evoke a kind of naturally occurring humanitarian response. Like pigs aren't double checking. You know, if somebody asks them for $5, they're like, oh yeah, I've got $5. And it's just an automatic response in that way. Social conditions get in the way of that. But if this is the sort of essence of the chi of the pig. Sounds pretty good, right? So, what happens in a year in which Earth sits on top of water? So the heaviness, the sort of pressure of Earth. Think about the image that comes up for me is like geysers, Yellowstone, right? Because you move from continuity or yang earth dog to containment. You know, the kind of earth is a containment earth that comes with a yin earth pig. But you can never like completely hold water. There's always release from the pressure. And the expression of how that is released is through simply our incarnation, is through like the body. Right? So the chi goes from this awareness of ourselves as sort of finger puppets of the ancestors that happened in the dog year, into more of our own personal experience in interconnection here, in this physical, incarnated realm. Like pigs aren't materialists necessarily; they're sensualists. Right? Materialist is more coarse. Right? Things are something to do things with. But the pig is more about like the experience of being here, and that sort of pure kind of way, pure sort of way, as defined by our senses. So the point is that our bodies become the vehicle for the unfolding of the year. Our senses, and by extension of all that, like your motives, your preferences. All of these things stand front and center for the nature, for sort of exploring the nature of our own enjoyment. Yeah, so have fun. But there's a funny little phrase that Ming used to use all the time, and that I'll use here when talking about like these meditative practices with his teacher. His teacher would say, well, you reach this stage, and then it just sort of opens up into enjoyment. And then he would see my teacher's face, Ming's face, and he would say, not that much. Not that much. Right? So there's a modulation here. The trick is a kind of modulation of enjoyment. Water and the earth makes things muddy. Right? So pushing forward into enjoyment, into just simply what we want, creates conditions where there can be blowback, there can be difficulties. I like to play a little game here, right? So this is the Chinese talk. There's light side, dark side, right? Always. And the light side is this sort of sharing, generosity, showing up and showing up for others as yourself. It's kind of extension of one's own sense of enjoyment out to others in this kind of humanitarian way. Like, I like noodles, you like noodles too. Hey, let's connect. This idea of connecting. The dark side is much more stubborn, much more defensive, much more insistent on their own experience, and therefore like creating division. There's multiple sources that you can draw upon from the Zhou-Yi to many other Chinese documents that talk about the nature of enjoyment, that pleasure has a purpose. We live in a society where there's just as many ghosts and titans as there are humans, right? And we're all either chasing something completely that we're never really be satisfied with, or on the other end of dissatisfaction, we can never have that. And this kind of in this kind of cultural environment of our country, saying pursue a life of enjoyment, kind of a little bit dangerous. Yeah. So that sense of getting lost in a great piece of music, we all have that experience. There's a lot of people not very far from here out on the street that get lost every day in a kind of enjoyment. So addiction this year, spiking. And so it's good to remember that they're lost in their own sort of sensory as people who are therapists and trying to help others break addiction patterns. There's a strong year of work to really dive into the motivations of underlying certain behaviors. Right? So there's plenty of positives, especially springtime, talking about lucky and fun-loving and all these things that they can be. It's all very true. But we're also kind of situated in a time and place in which a sort of obsessive pursuit of sensation, of stimulus and response is problematic. It's not creating bridges. Enjoyment is to create bridges, either create or renew bridges between us to create a very mutually thriving society, humanitarian society. The funny thing is, there's no in this cosmology, there's no real moral hang-up about pleasure. The opposite of pleasure is not pain here. It's insecurity. If we don't, being in a pleasured way in life is actually one of the things that makes us human. Language, music, all those things, art. But we do those things. Pig Chi sort of invites us to realize the reason why we do these things is so we can stand in this kind of interconnected place with one another, in this mutual enjoyment. So, resonance. Think resonance. What drives me can also drive you. And how do we do enough for each other so that we can all sort of thrive together? Versus these more temporary places of indulgence, a stimulus response that can not only drive us apart, but can eventually, over time, destroy the ship we're sailing. Right. So both of these, they're both present this year in particularly strong ways because, again, pressure's on. Our sensory delights, there's nothing wrong with delight. There's nothing wrong with, having these sort of temporary experiences of sensational stimulus. No condemnation, just the invitation is to work on what can be shared. So that's the kind of larger holistic goal of Pig Chi. And these are sort of some of the dynamics that we're working with. Any questions from that? I saw this meme, I guess, that said, "What if joy is my only metric for success?" Sounds good. Very individualistic. I think the important thing about Earth Pig Chi is this remembrance of a common humanitarian, of everybody being able to have their time in the sun, so to speak. Yeah, great.
Sounds like maybe we were speaking of this year in Earth Day, you were mentioning that it's water, that's what naturally is.
Natively, yeah.
Is there like a third or some other kind of correlation to this, some other maybe next year's influence on top of this? Is there something like that?
Yeah.
It sounds like almost as if you're describing the Yin or something of the different elements and the layers of how all of these different energetic influences cascade?
I'll do you one better. I go back. I go back to the wood goat year. I go back to 2015. And the invitation there was very humanitarian, and this kind of like bursting forward, continual spring-like, guileless innocence of like, who are we, and working in that way. I'm working with this idea that because pigs and goats and rabbits, every year that occurs also references a trine of relationships. So we can look back. One of the things we can do is look back to what the inspirations of the wood goat year were. What kind of person do I want to be? And in that year, it was definitely brought forward the idea that every little thing you do matters. Not to get super mental about things, because we can definitely overthink things. But it's just walking with this meditation, walking with this reflection. This is the encouragement of the study of time. It's like you are actually a time being flowing through time, so there's no shortage of information, constantly shifting, right? So we can reflect in a way naturally to the wood goat year and draw upon this kind of what sort of environment do I want to see around me, and how that reflects, how that reflects what you're looking to be in this kind of very natural innocence sort of way. And the earth pig is this opportunity to act on the complexity of that. We all have very simple desires, right? We prefer lattes over cappuccinos, but there's these little preferences, and it's not making a hierarchy of preferences. It's only drawing us into, well, I drink cappuccinos because I'm at the cafe where my friends come. And so there's a bigger joy, maybe concentric circles rather than a hierarchy. Right? What brings me there is a cappuccino. What keeps me there are the people, right? So I ran a bar for 10 years, and I can tell you very strongly that, people might have came for the Guinness, but they didn't stay. They stayed because of the people. And I think you can do that and see that in multiple layers throughout our life and the motivations behind what we do. It's just that this year we're really right up front against our preferences, because hypocrisy is dangerous. It actually can shorten your life this year, because it will impact your body. Yeah. So your body, again, is this sort of primary vehicle for, like drop in, check your gut kind of thing. It's that energy and that chi, an invitation for that is like very strong. It'd be hard to ignore. Very hard to ignore. But in direct response to your question, the teachings would say that like every year is a combination of the year that came before it and the one that comes after it. And with rat is what we're referring to, moving into the metal rat, prematurely talking about that. There's definitely a social angle, but rat's reorganizing. Here with pig chi, we're sort of dispersing. Yeah, pig is often referred to as the end. It's sort of the place where all the other 12 animals kind of clumsily bump into each other, and there's this sort of chaotic, what they call the huntun, which is just this all the toys out on the table. And no particular rhyme or reason or pattern. It's just all there, all present. And with this kind of joyfulness. And then rat, it's like, well, let's put the plush toys here, and so they're immediately starting to reorganize things. Diaphanous, is a word that can come to mind. It's sort of like, again, getting very lost in our experience is super available to us. And if you have any kind of means of self-cultivation to be able to give you an orientation point to that, it's a good year. It's a very good year. So any kind of chi character that has any ounce of discipline. Positive, very positive year. Or any individual, given your fate or life experience, your relationships, also, they give you sort of an orientation for how to utilize that tendency toward enjoyment. Very positive. Very positive. So this year is kind of only as complex as the momentum bring you in and what your preferences are now. But I would encourage you not to lie to yourself. That's pretty much the only advice I could give this year. Is just don't lie to yourself. Be honest with yourself and others, and and be ready for the fact that it may produce muddy conditions. That's just the simple truth of it. Reorganization and reconstitution, values, strong values, that comes next year. Right now, it might be important to get muddy in order to see what you got, because there's a lot of ways in which we hide, and this could be a good year to kind of just really put everything on the table. What you see is what you get. It's a good time. Does that help? Yes.
So things in the 12-year cycle, can you speak to specifically the other larger cycles which are also produced?
Well, the other one that springs to mind is the 60-year cycle. And the end of the 60-year cycle comes with the water pig. So we're not quite there yet. We're still kind of working with material. But there's always a sense of endings. Yeah. Conclusions can be prompted in any pig year. But Earth pig year, less so. It's much more continuance. If you look at some of the historical stuff, you go back to 1959 or whatever, and you sort of look at the world politic. Mao lost his job, but Castro got his. So there's ways in which beginnings and endings are, same. And there's sort of a resolution available that can mean that there's whatever was coming in momentum. Mao lost his job because of a couple things that happened the years before, Great Report and such, and Castro got his job because of the work that was done in the 2 years before. So, there's sort of it depends, again, the kind of momentum that you're coming in with. But there's no, to my mind, there's no end of a larger cycle that's happening. You got another 24 years for that to come, and that will be incredibly potent, because that's 60 years of material kind of washing out all on the table, which could be potentially overwhelming for people. Here, we're rooted someplace. Following the Earth dog here, we may be rooted to our place, our people. Stubbornness on a tribal level, most likely going to continue when you're thinking about world politics. But not necessarily confrontational. Pigs don't start trouble, but they can finish it. So it's really important to remember that there's a kind of laziness to pigs. Really much more interested in what's playing at the cinema than changing the world, right? They need goats for that. They need goats to kind of I need you to go take these flyers down the street. Okay, and they'll help, and they can be an enormous help in that way. But with Earth, especially with Earth pig, there's a kind of there's a potential for lethargy there, and aimlessness. Just kind of I don't know, what do you want to do? Kind of energy. So whatever momentum's coming in, and whatever sort of guiding relationships you have, will still be very active. Dramatic change really comes from how much we've been bottling up. So like, if you have clients that have been working with emotional issues for a long time and have a hard time really getting them out, it would be very difficult to hold back. It's like it's going to start impacting the body. So people who do somatic work, great year, excellent year, very potential like life-changing year for people. If you can get them into their body. So physical practices, larger than that, yeah, all physical practices flourish this year. So yeah, less talking, more feeling. Move, get them to respond, give them stimulus, see what they do. This is great. Yeah, so try some delayed gratification. Just try it. Just try it. I'm not telling you that you need to, but like there's an opportunity here, to kind of flirt with it and see what you can do with it. The pig, the enjoyment that comes with pig is just as much about giving as it is about getting. So it's really important. I can't emphasize it enough. This idea that our sort of resonance with something is a tool by which we can build bridges and create a much more equitable society. If you like fresh green beans, there's guarantee you somebody out there that does too, and maybe they don't have it, so there's an opportunity there to extend that sense of generosity and compassion. Could be a really worthwhile and useful tool. But on the flip side, expect the entertainment industry to explode. 60 years ago, the Barbie doll was created. So it gives you kind of an idea about the tone of entertainment, the tone, the imagery, very sensory driven, very out of control sorts of desirous responses that are available. Almost superficial, maybe a little bit shallow. But you can dig deeper. That's not to reject those things, but it's also an opportunity to kind of examine your motives in general in life, like what really drives you. Well, real quickly, let's get a little bit of time. So either any more questions, or like I can actually talk a little bit about how the 12 animals work in the year. Does that sound good? Any rats here? No rats? Whoa. Okay. All right. Interesting.
Lots of rats in my life.
Yeah.
Lots.
I sat this one out. Well, there's rats, they're no stranger to social dynamics. So this year, like, they'll be very engaged. At the same time, they're not really into open-ended things. They're into, like, creating some boundaries to how the party operates. So essentially, they want to organize the nonsense that they see around them a little bit. So, like, try to admit that you like doing that, and don't think you have to be like other people. Like you can be of service in organizing those things, and you will be appreciated for it. So, do your best not to get like unseated in yourself by the lack of control in the environment, because that will wax and wane for sure. Especially for the first 2 moons of the year. We're moving into a fire tiger moon, so expect everybody to kind of jump on right away. Spring will spring very quickly, and then it's all followed up by another fire rabbit, and then heavies out again with dragon and snake. So. Like I say, like with rats, provide a simple and organized place for people to detox. So it's like the Burning Man med tent. Just like be of service. Oxes? Okay, all right. Excellent. So what goes double? What goes for the rat goes double for you? You're not necessarily asked to organize the party, right? But you're sort of supportive and a steady presence. If you can provide a steady presence this year, it pays off in a big way. Even though it may not seem that way at first, but eventually you will be appreciated for what you bring. Don't try to make sense of what everybody else is doing. Like, don't try to make sense right away. It's really about just finding enjoyment and the levels of service that you bring. So work can be really rewarding, like finding a second family. Wherever you have a common interest with other people, there will be family, pigs make family wherever they go. That's the idea. But for oxen in particular, it's about finding family and common interests, in particular work interests. So, don't make a fuss too much. You already kind of know what you like. Pretty set in your ways in some ways, and just be careful not to step on other people's toes. And like I say, what I say here is try not to step on other people's toes on your way to the beach. Just follow through, and also have this sort of side door, being a good helping in service kind of present. So it's very similar to the rat, but a lot less neurotic. Any tigers? Yeah, right. Welcome. Yeah. Tigers, most all the other tigers out there doing stuff. Yeah. Pigs and tigers are secret admirers. They really enjoy each other's company. They blend mutual respect and a love of adventure. So I would recommend to kind of put your ducks in a row before you get out on that adventure to sort of prevent chaos from starting. But for some tigers, that's actually part of the fun. So any sort of discipline sort of practices really do serve you well as a kind of a nice complement to this environment of aimlessness. But then take some downtime. Enjoy your black stripe and recognize it. Tigers are, what distinguishes them is that they have this orange and black stripe. So they're very active and they identify themselves with their action. And at the same time, they have to come into relationship with the need for stillness, with the need for isolation, with the need for quiet. It takes them a while to get there, to appreciate that aspect of them. But once they do, it makes all the action that they do much more potent. So pig provides both. It provides an opportunity to just kind of chill out, and then also to demonstrate their own sense of discipline and accomplishment by a very determined environment as well. So they can stand out. So it's a very good year for tigers. You can let your desires sort of guide you, but just try not to hurt anybody. Yeah, no, I think by now you've channeled that wood. You've honed it into a fashionable tool. So utilize it. Yeah. And at the same time, explore. There's no harm in exploring the tigers this year. Again, just be honest with yourself. Rabbit? Oh, hi. Okay. Pretty favorable year. In 2015, you were the queen of the social scene, and this year, you were valued for sort of a deep insight that you brought to a larger societal movement. And this year, the auspices are, generally speaking, that one or many will want to take you home. So it's very personal year, and it's a year where you could expect many suitors. as they say. Yeah, pigs and rabbits. They match up quite well. So there's a social mingling here that will be pretty irresistible, like hosting in the home or like parties, very like socially engaged, potential like social butterfly. Great. So good luck follows if you're kind to others, particularly those people that you find important. You'll be very emotionally deeply valued for your support. Lots of opportunities. So personal concerns are generally highlighted. Of course, it depends on your own particular expression of fate. For rabbits, you want to think about like family. As I say, like there's the potential for a lot of pregnant rabbits this year. So be careful. Be careful. That's not a priority. Dragons. Okay. Yeah, right. So you're freed up from dogmas a little bit, heavy-handed, generally, whether you want to admit it or not. So you're free to sort of explore the grandness of your own desires, like the things that like drive you. You're an effective party of one, and you can sort of explore your own particular needs much more freely this year than last. You can be the center of attention if you want to. So the real key is really try to be inclusive. Try to recognize this is a natural talent of yours, is to sort of find the integrity of the gathering and find the thread. Why are we all here? Dragons can tease that out and actually very astutely represent it, so that can make them sort of center of attention in any particular gathering. So you can get a lot of attention, but also recognize that in a pig year, easy come, easy go. There'd be a lot of people that like surrounding your office one day and then nobody the next. So it's important to try to take it in stride and build some momentum. Rat year, much better year, but no obstruction, very favorable. It's really about just the attention of other people, their attention span, whether or not they can keep up with you. Yeah. So try to forgive them if they can't keep up. Snake. So the quality of pigchi is a kind of naivete. It's sort of in this place of equal distance between all objects. You can pretty much know most of it and assume that the rest doesn't matter. So like it stretched out far enough in time for a pig. Things are looking up. That's always their assumption. It's kind of a naive assumption, but it works, and it's just an expression of the time. Snakes are not naive. They're not naive at all. Yeah. They're always very mindful of the stress that comes from sharing this sort of material world with others. So a pig's lack of subtlety can feel somewhat loud. Yeah. So I would say for snakes who are always really interested in hiding in plain sight, they're kind of interested in retreat as a matter of their own truth. They can hide in plain sight. That's what I want to say. So just to have a situational game plan going forward in any particular situation. Snakes do not necessarily like being cornered by compulsive honesty. I just really want to have a conversation with you. Can we set this up for later? Just like give yourself the right conditions to make yourself feel comfortable and give yourself some space. So overall, it's best in a pig year for snakes to sort of embrace their particular needs and to embrace their particular sort of cadre of people who understand, have similar tastes, right? So do what you can to find nuance in a world that's got the volume turned up to 11, right? And you know, a film festival, it's a good place for snakes. Yeah, very almost exclusive. You know, sort of little gatherings, very unique tastes would tend to, those places that tend to suit snakes best. Good place for them to hide out with their friends that have similar interests. Horses? Right. Oh, yes, of course. So horses are based on action, and it's a good year for horses to get into their projects and go ahead and expansively so. Just try to tap into what it feels like to complete a project this year, because that sensation and then the following sensation of maybe taking a vacation, a time of rest, staycation, whatever, you don't have to go anywhere. Just try the sensation of actually completing something and then resting, because and get used to that, because the rat's gonna make it difficult to complete anything for horses, because you'll get bogged down in the details. So rest up. That's what I would say this year, and kind of tie off all your loose ends. Get everything nice and regular and predictable. That will give you a good format that you could survive through the sort of persnickety nature of the rat. Yeah. Goats? Okay, good year for you. Goats are wired for altruism. They think in terms of, ideologically in terms of broad social values. And so goats can actually utilize the pig ears as a resource. They can take this sort of open-ended impulses of pig and actually turn them into social movement. They're interested in creating harmony. So it could be a very busy year for goats, trying to organize what seems somewhat chaotic, but that's their goal. That's what they want to do. They really want to kind of put everything in the right place and in the right order to serve as many people as they possibly can. So the only drawback is that you're going to have some frustration with the pig's sort of short attention span. So I would say try to appreciate the way that people naturally come together. Also relax a little bit. Because 2020 is going to be a somewhat intense year. So take advantage of the humanitarian tendencies now and enlist followers. Get people ready for the intensity of 2020. Monkeys. Okay, monkeys are pretty curious about parties. They're also kind of like social butterfly sort of qualities to them. For both monkeys and roosters, there's a call to get into your body. Out of your head and into the body as much as possible. That's not necessarily the easiest thing for either monkeys or roosters, but that's definitely the invitation, because again, there's some more open-ended qualities can make monkeys a little bit suspicious. Monkeys like hard targets that they can relate to. So there could be some reference points given by the earth pig, but they're likely to be ones that are given more by the body, physical sensations, common goals. Try to connect the dots in a similar way like the goat. Try to connect the dots and organize a smaller subset of people, not so broad. Consider that'll set you up well for the rat. I don't know why I keep coming back to this, but consider leading a group of people on an adventure. Show up, first small group, and do something particular, and it could be fun for all who participate. So, but also it could be social butterfly all year long, and feel like I didn't really do much. I don't know what happened, So if you want to be constructive, think small, thinking about it. Rooster. Okay, we'll skip Rooster. No, Roosters again, they're very much like precision. And in a pig year, it'll be kind of hard to make sense of what's happening. So don't try. Stay like snake, stay with the small group of people that get you. And like monkey, get in your body. Qigong, physical practices, very important for both monkeys and roosters, but particularly roosters, because they think constantly and it affects their health. So yoga practices, very strong. Try to take it easy, try to relax, or be in service like an ox with small people. I mean, roosters can be like a place of like the ox, sort of this relieving place of rationality. Like people go commit a series of actions, and if they want to make sense of it, like why did I do what I did? Want to explore my motives? Talk to a rooster. They'll break it down for you. They want to understand why you did it, but they'll break it down for you. So they can be in service in that way, but for themselves, it might be a little bit of I'm not sure what's going on. Sort of weird. Thoughts? Relax. Yeah. Dog year was a little bit difficult for most dogs. A little bit heavy, So don't expect things to make sense right away this year. Take a step back. Take a deep breath. Relax with those people who were there with you through last year, and really enjoy their company. Dogs, they have this sort of rousted, engaged for action side and sort of a sleepy side, because they are a combination of rooster and pig. And in a pig year, they're encouraged to just kind of ease back a little bit, relax. You deserve it. You worked hard. Autumn, things might start making a little bit more sense, processing-wise, like all the changes and moves that have been happening. In winter time, actually, has the opportunity to be very sweet. Pigs? Yes! Oh, right on. Welcome. Question about pigs in a pig year is can there be too much of a good thing? And the answer is quite possibly. So it's really about infusing your desires and the exploration of your preferences that naturally happen with some degree of humility, with some degree of maybe some delayed gratification. Just try it out. The sensation itself actually might be joyful in a way. Pigs are no stranger getting sort of lost in an experience. But if you get carried away, you might miss, like I said, you might miss your bus. You might miss your job interview or your car payment or it could sort of cascade into this place where things don't get done. So enlist your friends. Let them sort of be a guide for you this year. So just try it. Just try not eating the second dessert. Any other questions?
The question maybe is a little bit outside of this
Broader question.
context. Yeah, but I'm wondering, are there books or do you have people reading about the Western astrology and the Chinese zodiac? Say cow and the Pisces. What does that mean? Sometimes
Yeah.
They don't seem to be compatible. You don't have to answer the specifics. I'm
Sure.
just wondering if people have studied that.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember the poet's name, but I was thinking about this we dance around the circle and suppose while the secret sits inside and knows. Yeah. So, I'm not bringing truth. I'm bringing a tradition, a tradition that has a certain explanation for how we can describe our experience, how we can relate to our experience. If any astrological system is trying to tell you something that doesn't actually connect with your experience, they're selling you something, right? The real point is to actually give you an opportunity to reflect upon your own, actually just reflect upon your own experience. The basis of this system of the Tongshu or Zi Wei Dou Shu is syncretic. It definitely involves a lot of Confucian sort of modalities of what it means to be a human being. And the biggest part, sort of core teaching of the Confucian approach is just to pay attention to your own experience. So in direct, it's kind of a roundabout way of like talking this, like even the Western astrology certainly has something to say, about, like, I'm not familiar with the systems. If you told me I was going to be an astrologer 6 years ago, I would have been, what? Like, here I am, doing this work. So I don't have like an affinity for tons of other astrological systems to be able to answer that question directly. I know that kind of work has been done, and I know that there are crossovers. You go back to like basic relationships, elemental relationships, water, fire. These things can have some bridge, and seasons. Looking at things seasonally, because macrocosm. So we're talking about a year, but the qualities of that year are found in our day, are found in our month, are found in in different cycles available. So I think some of those crossovers are possible. I don't know the question. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
I remember attending Liu Ming's talks, and he would sort of talk about the year for the United States. I think we're are we a monkey?
We're a fire monkey country. Yeah.
Do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last few years have been like super dramatic, of course, and part of that is the momentum that was generated in 2016. It was a fire monkey year, and we are a fire monkey country. China has often described the U.S. as lion's head and snake's tail, which means all big and blustery up front and then escapes out the back. Right? So we don't have a track record for following through on our stated ideas, from the standpoint of the goat. Right? We don't really embody it from nose to tail, and that has really shown up. The chickens have come home to roost on that, and so there's so many cofactors and layers, to explore in that. On a world political stage, I would say that there's probably much more likelihood of entrenchment of the divisions that we saw last year. But what I would say that there's the kind of seed, possibility, and hope of it's like careful with the hope. That there could be like a much more deep-seated humanitarian desire within it. From our own aspirations, if we can connect those things with a larger well of humanitarian desires that are everywhere, that can actually generate like a desire to do better. Like there's definitely a caring aspect, to the pig. It just depends on where you place your understanding of what it means to be a human being and who we are here together. Does everybody think there should be clean water? Okay, then show up. So that sort of push by the goat will actually help drive us forward. So I think there's definitely seeds for shifts and changes, but there's also a lot of momentum of how it's been. So Pig is, maybe setting the stage and enlisting followers. I would look more to 2020 and what Rat Chi might bring, where there's actually potentially even ruthless distinctions made about what matters and what doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you.